Hey, I'm Sarah Smith, family doctor, clinical day advisor, and the chatting coach. Welcome back to Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast, where we're going to be interviewing peers or world experts who can help us think about our clinical day in a way that is more sustainable and create time for our lives outside of medicine. Welcome back, everybody. Today we have with us Laura Hambley Lovett. Lovely to have you with us. Welcome.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I am an organizational psychologist, meaning I specialize in making organizations better places for human beings, whether that's building healthier cultures, more effective leaders, stronger teams, and helping employees thrive. Because I believe if employees thrive in an organization, then the business thrives, whatever that business may be. And I've worked across industries, and I also run a practice called Canada Career Counseling that helps people navigate careers and workplace challenges throughout their lives. And that's across Canada. So I've been at it for 25 years in my career, and I love what I do. And yeah, there's more to say. I'm a mother of three. My oldest is 20, my youngest is 15, based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Lovely. That's so good. It's so nice to talk to someone in Canada as well. Now, tell us a little bit about what got you into this field. What attracted you to it? You've been doing it for a long time, but tell us your journey.
I always wanted to help people, which is cliche, but I do truly want to help people, which is what drew me to counseling psychology, did a master's in that, was drawn to career psychology because it was very niche and not a lot of psychologists practice that. And I said, but wait a minute, career is most of people's waking time, and it's a huge part of their identity because the first two questions you ask are, what's your name? My name's Sarah. What do you do? That's the second question, for better or worse. And I figure if people are struggling in their careers and their identity and their purpose, it filters into the rest of their life. So I'm just really, I love career counseling. And then I ended up being drawn to organizational psychology a few years later. I'd been working for a few years in industries and got into consulting in organizations and said, wow, organizations are like families. They're so interesting. There's dynamics, there's things at play, there's these cultures, and you can have the great ones and the poor ones. And what is all these people issues in workplaces are so interesting. And if I can help have an impact on leaders, then I can impact all the people that are working for them and make the culture better and then make the human lives better. So I did my doctorate in organizational psychology. I finished that in 2005.
There you go. Okay, so this is wonderful because I love hearing about how we can improve the whole culture and the environment that people are working within. I agree. It is a huge amount of our waking lives.
It is. Yeah.
Now,
And I've worked across industries and I see a lot of similar patterns across industries. And it's so interesting. I know a little bit about a lot of industries and a lot of careers, but I also know a lot about the human side, the motivation, what makes a great leader, what motivates people, what harms people, what people need and want in their work. So yeah, there's a lot of common threads.
yeah. Now, one of the areas that you've been researching and specializing in is toxic leadership. And I know we were talking before we started the call, a lot of our listeners either identify as having been within a toxic environment or having toxic leadership, or even just having that person in their environment, whether it's the MA or the nurse or the secretary, somebody who's got that, what we might say is toxic about them. What sort of things have you learned in your research? What can we know about toxic culture and what sort of things should we be watching out for?
Sure, that is a great question. So, during the pandemic, I saw a lot of really great leadership behavior at play where people realized, wait a minute, we're all human beings, we're all dealing with a time of uncertainty. And there was just a lot of stress that people had, and then being forced to work at home in certain fields when you weren't used to that. And I just saw some great leadership behaviors happening. And then fast forward few years later, I started to see more and more instances of toxic workplaces surfacing again. And I saw our clients at Canada Career Counseling suffering from it, where they'd be broken, they'd be in tears, their confidence was shredded by what I call a toxic boss, because they're not a true leader. A true leader brings out the best in their people, while a toxic boss depletes them. So then I went about doing some research on this. So I have students at the University of Calgary, where I'm an adjunct professor of organizational psychology. And I said, let's look at this toxic leadership research area. There wasn't much research on it post-pandemic, and there wasn't much in North America, period. And I said, oh my goodness, we need to do some research on this. And we started to look into it by interviewing survivors of toxic bosses across industries and surveying hundreds of them across North America to say, what are the behaviors? What are the impacts? Learned so much that I ended up writing a book on it called I Wish I'd Quit Sooner: Practical Strategies for Navigating and Escaping a Toxic Boss. Healthcare and medicine. I would say that healthcare has more than its fair share of toxic bosses,
Right.
unfortunately.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And I think for a lot of our listeners who are doctors and nurse practitioners, clinicians, we're dealing with patients who are also in toxic environments. So while we're going to learn this for ourselves, I think we're going to learn this for our patients as well. Do we have to leave toxic environments?
Do we have to leave them?
Yeah. Is it a matter of either he goes or I go, or she goes and or I go?
Here's the thing, right? So we need to define what toxic is, because I think that word can be overused a bit. And
Mhm.
as I was doing this work, I realized there's actually a lot of difficult bosses or leaders, and then there's truly toxic ones. And the
Mhm.
difficult ones are frustrating to work with. They may be absent. They may not be good communicators. They may be disorganized. There's these things that make them frustrating and difficult, or even incompetent when it comes to leading people, because oftentimes you get promoted into managing people because you're a good nurse, you're a good occupational therapist, you're a good whatever, you're a good engineer. You get promoted into it with minimal to no training, minimal to no support, and it's a whole new skill set. It's a whole new skill set.
Yeah.
And the people skill set of leading people is a very nuanced, very, there's not right or wrong answers. There's all kinds of shades of gray. It's very emotional. It's tricky, but there's things that work and don't work. And there's a whole body of knowledge around it. Yet we're thrown into management without the right training and support. It would be like being thrown into medicine without having had the training and being asked to diagnose and prescribe. It would make no sense.
Yeah. Okay. So absolutely, we see people being promoted all the time. And we do hear those who are aware of their leadership style or have that insight. Oh, I better go and figure out how to do this well. Otherwise, I might just start to be a miserable person. Whether that means
Yeah.
I'm taking on more responsibility and I'm now feeling burnt out myself and I'm going to start to try and divvy up some of this work, but in a way that's not helpful to the team. They might go and do some leadership, or we might even have workplaces that say, hey, we want to promote you here, go do some leadership training. But
Yeah.
I've even heard the instance where somebody might be considered toxic and they're sent off to these leadership courses and they come back and they say, oh, I did this course, so therefore I'm right. And it hasn't changed their anything about them. They have not seen the reason why they were sent off to this course and
Mhm.
what they're doing within the workplace that's creating harm.
No, because a truly toxic leader does not have self-insight nor self-awareness and does not want to. So they can be sent to the fanciest course. You could send them to Harvard for the best leadership training in the world, and it would pump up their feathers because they were going to Harvard. But it's like putting a Band-Aid on something that actually needs a surgery. And so they're not going to learn how to become a better leader simply because the door is closed. Their ego, they're leading with a giant, massive ego, and they're not open to vulnerability, to authenticity, to areas of growth. And they love the sound of their own voice, and they believe that the problems are due to other people, not themselves. So, yeah, I don't think they should be in people leadership roles. Period. End of story. The only way that they can truly change is through massive interventions. And it's typically a deep-rooted personality challenges, personality disorders, deep-rooted traumas that were never resolved from childhood. So that's a whole other backstory. But I'd say the truly toxic ones should not be in people leadership. And if they're there and you're working for them, it's not going to get better. You need to make the choice to get into a better situation.
Okay. How do we identify that somebody is toxic or an environment is toxic? What were the workers who identified themselves to your researchers? What were they saying? What was their experience of this workplace or leader?
So toxic is a series of behaviors over time that harm individuals' engagement, productivity, and well-being. So the behaviors can be either overt or covert. Overt behaviors are the obvious harassing, the outward bullying, the aggression, the things that you think about when you think toxic boss, berating you in front of your team. And those things very much do happen. But it's the covert behaviors that are equally as harmful. And those are the manipulative, silent, sneaky, like weeds wrecking a garden, but silently. It happens gradually. And those are the ones that are dishonest manipulators. So now I'm starting to use the personas from my book. The dishonest manipulator, the unethical corrupter, the gaslighter, the gaslighting behavior, really quite toxic. So things like that just gradually erode your well-being.
Yeah. Do these leaders tend to be toxic to everyone in the workplace? Do they have particular people that they'll single out? Is it toxic for everyone below them?
That is a great question. And that one of the personas, the 8 personas, is called the Great Divider. And they're excellent at dividing teams and pitting people against each other. And they have their in group and their out group. So if you're in the in group, yeah, they'll treat you well. They play favorites, basically. But to be in the in group to a toxic boss, you typically need to be agreeing with everything they say, not challenging them, feeding into their needs, and sucking up to them, for lack of a better term.
Okay. So that probably in itself is not creating a wealth of health for that employee either, though.
No, ultimately not, but it can buy them time. And if they're on the right side of that, they can end up surviving there. But it's not the healthiest environment when your colleagues are being thrown under the bus and manipulated and all of that. It's pretty nasty.
Yeah, yeah. And what happens if you are on the wrong side of one of these bosses? What does it look like when you get them in front of you as a psychologist? What are you noticing for that human, and how do we help
Oh.
them?
Oh, they feel trapped. That's why there's a cage on the front of my book with a bird escaping, but they often feel I'm trapped here because I can't get another job easily. I'm tied in. I have a pension. I have financial attachment to this organization. So it's almost like an abusive relationship where I can't leave my partner because of the financials or the children, or you just feel trapped and you feel like there's no escape. So then if you're a high achiever, what you'll do is you'll try to impress them. You'll work harder. You'll put in more time, but it tends not to pay off. It tends to get worse over time. And uh, oftentimes they describe, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. That's how they feel. And then it gradually depletes their mental health. So they start to get high levels of anxiety. Their sleep is disturbed. They can start to become depressed, but it's usually presenting more as anxiety than depression. And then what worries me most, Sarah, is their self-confidence is just eroded. And then the thought of trying to find another job, they can't even, they're exhausted and they're not confident. And you need to be confident in the job search process.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's not an easy thing to just jump into another workplace, especially if you're in that situation where you're feeling like you're perhaps believing what the toxic person is saying about
Mhm.
you, or you're not necessarily going to get a great reference for the next job. That's all going to be really tough.
Very. Yeah, it is. Yeah, you feel very trapped and vulnerable. And so my job when I end up coaching people, because people reach out from all over the world saying, I'm under a toxic boss. I may be at even a vice president who is educated and experienced, and they're being damaged by a toxic CEO. And they're saying, how do I navigate this? And then what I do is I help build them up and realize you're not alone. This is a more common problem than we think, and you have options. In fact, you have six options. What? I have six options? Yes, you do. And we're going to talk about those options and get you back into the driver's seat of your career.
Yeah, that's a positive thing. We might go there in a moment. If they have to stay for now, is there
Mhm.
anything that can be used to help reduce the harm that's being every day when they're in that environment? They're experiencing more erosion of self, more erosion of confidence, worsening mental health. Is there any tools or strategies that are used to just help you survive within that or in that culture for now if you can't leave tomorrow?
Yeah, so it's about care and connection. So self-care, obviously, I always say taking care of your physical, emotional, mental, spiritual health, all the different types of health, and looking at what small things can you do because you don't have that much energy, but could you go on a walk after work? Could you make sure to have maybe your lunch with a friend rather than at your desk? Could you make sure to fit that yoga class in or those things that'll fill you and then connecting? So, is there anyone you can trust in the workplace to open up to about this? And you got to be careful because a truly toxic boss will have their political dynamics going on. So, you have to be careful of who you can trust. But if there's someone you can trust to open up to, and usually it's more than one person who's being targeted. And you can
Mm,
even talk to people who have left. So oftentimes there's people who have left and then they can talk to you about what it was like. And then you realize, oh my gosh, this isn't just me. This happened to this other person who's now gone and now they're in a better place. And it just gives you a sense of hope.
yeah. I have patients coming in telling me about workplaces and giving me these terrible stories. Just that being validated, being understood, being believed has, for them,
Mhm.
said this has been very helpful. They've felt very more empowered or less hurt by the whole thing. Just having somebody to connect with and be able to
Yeah.
tell their story and to have that understanding that something's happening in their workplace and it's not okay.
Yes, exactly. It goes a long way.
Yeah. Okay, so you said we have choice. So if we've got a physician sitting in this terrible workplace, they've got somebody who is above them, who they feel is picking on them, who is degrading them, who's gaslighting them, who's out to get them in some way, like terrible things that we hear about in workplaces often. What are some of these options? How do we go? How do we
Right.
make it better?
And I want to reiterate, I find that it's so ironic that healthcare has toxic bosses when it's about wellness and health and healing. And then you're in a situation that harms your health. And there's research. I cite it in my book about the link between toxic workplace culture and cardiovascular health
Mm,
impacts. It
mm,
really is a thing. But I would say a physician who's suffering under a toxic boss or anyone that's suffering under one, there's the option to quit, right? You always have the option to quit, but it feels insurmountable because to have gotten through med school, let's face it, it's gruelingly difficult. You're a high achiever and you're used to toughing things out. You have grit, you have determination. You don't quit, right?
mm.
So you feel like you're quitting, you're giving up, but I just want to say that it's not giving up. finding something healthier for yourself is not giving up, by the way. But if you can't quit, then there's, okay, I can stay and I can set boundaries, and you can change your psychological mindset. And I talk about that in the book, about how we all have a psychological contract with our job where I put certain things in and I get certain things out. And there's the monetary part, the employment contract and the legalities, but then there's the more unwritten stuff. So I will go the extra mile. I'll stop and get muffins for my team, or I'll go to that extracurricular activity outside of work. You can start saying, I'm going to set boundaries on this because I need to take care of myself. I'm going to do my job, but I'm not going to do any more. And I'm not going to check email after a certain time. I'm going to turn my phone off. So you can start setting those boundaries so that you can psychologically get through. But I have to add, a toxic boss may not like that. Depending on which type of toxic boss you have, they may not like boundaries. But it's something that you have the choice to do, to try that out. And then there's a medical leave. So going on a medical leave is one of the choices, and I flesh that out. I flesh out the pros, the cons, and sometimes you have no choice. The body decides for you. You are burnt out, and we know burnout is a workplace phenomenon. Toxic bosses lead to burnout. The research that we've done on that is clear. So I would say, yes, you can take a medical leave. That is an option. You can go down I'm going to file a complaint. Okay, I'm going to file a complaint. I'm going to talk to HR, or I'm going to whistleblow. And then I talk about all the pros and cons and stories of real people who have done that, where it's worked out in different ways for them. But I want everyone to know you have options here. And you have the option of, my favorite out of all the options is creating a winning exit plan. And you set a GR date, which is a good riddance date. And you say, after the good riddance date, I'm no longer here. And then we work backwards. How are we going to get out? Okay. And out may be another job within the hospital or the corporation or wherever you're working. Or it could be, maybe I want to start my own medical practice. Maybe I want to be an entrepreneur, or maybe I just want to go work for a healthier workplace. That was a long answer. Sorry, but there's a lot of options
No,
with 6.
no, we need lots of options because each situation is so different, like you say. And I don't know that we'll find the answers for everyone today on the podcast, but it's important to have just that imagination, the storytelling of how is it possible to get out from under this. Some of the physicians we hear about have a toxic person or environment that's trying to force them out, and they're trying to force them out by showing that they are doing harm towards patients. They are almost construing stories or scenarios where it's showing that the doctor is not doing the right thing, and then their risk of losing their entire career. Can you imagine having done medicine and you get to the end and you're loving seeing patients, and suddenly you've got this environment that doesn't want you and is trying to actively seek and destroy you? That is so harmful to that physician. And now we're
Oh,
looking at
yeah.
trying to find lawyers, and we can't just whistleblow because everybody's in on it, or it
Yes.
feels like
Yeah.
everybody's in on it.
Yeah.
And you've got that desperation of such severe bullying from this environment.
Oh, yeah. It's terrible. It's bullying the caregiver, because we need our physicians to be at their very best so they can have the best judgment, the best empathy, the best bedside manner, all of those things. And if you're in a toxic workplace, you're not at your best. You're short fused. You're just going through the motions. It's just very hard.
Yeah, you can't even correct a nurse because that's going to get back to the team. That's going to be used as more evidence against you. This is really system-wide corruption, and it's
Yeah.
very damaging. We see people come out the other side of this, and it takes years to get over it. And they
Yes.
don't even
Yeah.
trust themselves. They're like, is it me? Am I
Yeah.
actually doing
Mhm.
harm? Like, that is such a terrible place for these amazing physicians to get to.
Oh, it makes me so upset. And then going the
Mm,
legal route, I talk about that in my book, going legal, right? Getting a lawyer. It's hard. It's a decision because it's an emotional investment as well as a financial one, but there are options and there are cases when that will make sense. It depends
mm,
on you. And I do think that Some of the worst stories have come from healthcare, and I'm just, I'd expect them on Wall Street or Hollywood or the finance industry, etc. But when I see them in healthcare, education, higher education is a hotbed for toxic leadership. That's very sad to me. And nonprofits are another one that's come up in the research.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the terms I've heard, and you may or may not have come across it, is the silent quitting. So that's that. I liken it to the gray rock approach when we're talking about people in abusive relationships, the silent quitting of not doing the extra this or that, saying no to this or that, like just not loudly, just letting work be work and starting to create more value in your life outside of medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. So finding other things to build up your confidence to fill your need for purpose and meaning. Yeah, absolutely. But I would say medicine is a calling, right? And it's sad to me if you have to just treat it like a job and it's so toxic that you're not able to just put your full self into it. I just would really encourage trying to get out from under that toxic boss or filing a report against them. And if more than one of you are suffering, come together and make the complaint together. And that's how we got started with the Me Too movement back in 2017. It was, hey, this happened to me too, me three. And toxic bosses are the same thing, that we need to start having conversation about it and caring enough to connect on it and bring awareness to the issue. And that's what I'm really trying to do.
Yeah. One of the things I've heard that is such a beautiful opposite of this is when the workplace comes to you and says, "What do you need?" And they mean it and they want to help you succeed. And I feel like when I ask physicians to think about what do you need to be successful in your day, what do you need to be able to create sustainability, you can tell who's in a toxic environment because they just roll their eyes. And there's no way I'd even ask for that because all that's going to happen is I'll be ridiculed or I'll be told no. I'm expected to be the same as all of my peers, even though I have this and this going on in my life. And I just feel so heartbroken and downtrodden on their behalf.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I can't agree more.
Yeah. All right. What about burnout? So we've had a bit of discussion about burnout. You're saying that it really does contribute to burnout. What are some of the things that you've seen, maybe not such terrible toxic environments, but as you've talked to survivors of this or other workers through your career, what are we looking at in terms of burnout strategies at the moment?
Strategies or
Yeah.
prevention?
Prevention is probably better than burnout.
I always view burnout, I speak about burnout a lot. I'm a professional speaker, so I'll speak at events and conferences and sites and whatever. So burnout is on a continuum, and we're all on that continuum where we can lead to burnout. We first become reactive. So we're healthy and then we become reactive and then we become injured and then we become ill. And burnout is a form of illness where we're utterly exhausted, we become cynical, and we lose the belief in our own abilities. And it's an end state. So by the time you're actually burnt out, you really can't function very well. You're just going through the emotions, or you end up going on a medical leave or you
Mm,
get sick. You
mm,
basically get sick with some sort of chronic illness, and it's very sad. So we want to avoid burnout. But I'm
mm,
seeing across industries there's a burnout pandemic going on, and it's really the biggest cause is systemic overload, like work overload, I would
mm,
say, followed closely by workplace culture, unhealthy workplace culture. So hustle cultures that don't have enough people or staff, and then you're constantly overloaded, and the expectation is not to take breaks. You can't take vacation time. You're just always on the go, like a computer that's left on rather than a rechargeable device. Humans are rechargeable devices. We need time to reboot, recharge, rejuvenate. And I would say that burnout is something that we need to stay ahead of so that we can do the little things each day and each week that fill our reserves and fill our recharge our battery so that we don't go down the burnout path. But if you're in an organization that doesn't allow that, it's going to be really difficult.
Got it. Okay. So often the organization's not looking out for you. We hope that they are starting to learn how to look after you, but we know that medicine is prime for overworking people, not
Mhm.
having enough staff, and if staff numbers drop, the organization's delighted by that because their overhead goes down, and so they're not necessarily looking to replace that. Or they come in and say, we're taking out X number of you, and that means the rest of you are going to take on more work. So we have this always being asked to do more. Always.
Mhm.
I don't think I've ever seen an example where they've said, can you do less? It just isn't happening in the healthcare
Never,
field.
never.
Never.
And across industries. But I would say,
And
yeah,
we
healthcare.
and we
Yeah.
see those in the organization who are crispy, who I see exactly what you mean. They're a bit cynical, they're miserable in the workplace. So that's that. If we're noticing that about ourselves or our staff, that's burnout starting.
Yeah, when you see someone, it's a change. So you see a change in their mood, a change in their appearance, a change in their ability to meet deadlines or to focus. That's usually a sign that something's going on under the surface. And we need to have those conversations. How are you doing? How can I help? I
Hmm.
notice that you seem to be struggling. How can I help? And a
Hmm.
true leader asks those four words. How can I help? And then they mean it. They're not just saying it, they mean it. So a true leader is serving their people to make sure their people are thriving because thriving people equals thriving organization equals better bottom line equals better patient care. But somehow that correlation isn't understood. It's all about we got to fix the bottom line and at any cost.
Yeah, okay. So burnout prevention being asking ourselves those questions and asking those questions of those around us and seeing if we can take off some of the overworked, understaffed pieces of the workplace that are really contributing to that burnout.
Yes, burnout is a systemic workplace issue, and the workplace, the organization, the senior leadership need to address it. And too often it's, oh, okay, it's up to our people. Go to the EFAP, go to the counselor, or we'll bring in a yoga class, or we'll bring in a speaker like Dr. Laura to speak about burnout. And that's fine. I'd be happy to do that. But it needs to be the system. You need to look at your levels of overload. You need to look at how are you hiring and promoting people into leadership roles? Is
Mm.
it because they're ambitious and they're popular? And what is it? Are they friends with the CEO? Like, how are you making those decisions? Or are you making it on the fundamental attributes of good leadership and measuring them against those and making very careful hiring and promotion decisions? You need to hire slow and fire fast.
I like that. That's great. Is there any standout qualities in a human that makes them more likely to be a great leader?
100% self-awareness, humility, vulnerability, being able to
Hmm.
be vulnerable about we all have our weaknesses, we all have our
Hmm.
garbage that's gone on in our life. We all have vulnerabilities, and we need to be open that we're all just flawed human beings. So there's that. What else? Empathy. So we don't need them to be a bleeding heart, right? They don't need to have gone into social work, but we need someone to have a heart and have empathy somewhere in their palette of attributes. Empathy, what else? I think we hire too much based on confidence and charisma and stuff. And I think you can have leaders who are lower on charisma and still great leaders, right? You don't have to be an extrovert to be a great leader. You can be an introvert. You need to be a good listener to be a good leader. Good
Yeah,
active listening skills. If
yeah,
they talk all the time, how the heck are they listening? They're not.
yeah, yeah. You know what? I think what you just described sounds like the type of people we'd love in medicine too. Agree, not too bleeding hard, otherwise we get really burnt out very fast just because we're
Oh,
listening to terrible stories.
oh yeah.
But isn't it interesting the qualities we like in the humans who help look after us and nurture us, who make great leaders, are also great healthcare workers. So there we go. Love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Laura. Now, where do we find you if we're looking to learn more? So give us the name of your book again and also where we find you.
Sure. So my website is drlaura.live. So Dr. Laura, all is one word, .live. Not a doctor of medicine. I'm a doctor of industrial organizational psychology. But the Dr. Laura is easy to remember. That's why I chose the brand. And on the website, you'll see a tab called books, and you'll see my newest book and my other books. And yeah, I have a podcast as well, Where Work Meets Life, which is 6 years in, and it's all about how to have thriving humans and thriving organizations. So it's industry agnostic, but it's all about career fulfillment, leadership, well-being, and I talk about toxic bosses on there, of course, as well. But I also talk about burnout and stress and you name it. It's been a lot of fun, and I speak. I do a lot of speaking and then coaching one-on-one. I love when I can help someone individually or help a large audience. Both are great.
Yeah, I love that. And anything we didn't talk about that we should talk about before we end?
Just that there's too many toxic bosses out there, but there's some great ones out there too. And then there's everything in between. I have a bell curve concept about this, but I would say anyone who's in a leadership role, you're always going to be developing as a leader. It's a lifelong endeavor, and leadership is hard. It's not a set of soft skills. Leadership is hard. And if you're under a boss who's depleting you, life is too short. Don't let yourself be depleted by a boss, because you can find a better boss. You can find a better boss, or you can do what I do and work for myself.
We're seeing that becoming a little bit more of a common practice at the moment. Just doctors trying to find their autonomy in the world and potentially becoming their own bosses. And it can be coming out of the back end of a toxic environment. So I totally get that.
And a toxic boss teaches you a lot. It teaches you what not to do. It teaches you about yourself and your own resiliency and courage. I've had 2 toxic bosses over my career, and I've been an entrepreneur for a lot of my career. But when I was working, I've had a couple of them, and I know how it feels. And I just want you to know that you don't have to suffer like that. The grass is, in fact, greener.
There we go. All right. Thank you so very much for this conversation.
You are very welcome. I hope you stay well.
Thank you, and have a great week, everybody. Bye. Hey, if you found this podcast episode helpful, I would encourage you to like and subscribe. Every time you do, you help a colleague or friend find our podcast, and it can help them too. Don't forget to share it along with your friends. If you're looking for extra help, don't forget we have Charting Champions for physicians and Smarter Charting for nurse practitioners and other clinicians to help you get home with your work done. We are helping you create sustainable clinical medicine. Thanks for listening.